Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the channel. And today I'm going to go my review of WCW Sold Out 1999. Starting off the evening, we're going to go to our first match of the night. It is Mike Enos versus Chris Benoit. I thought this was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between Mike Enos and Chris Benoit, with Enos keeping the pace of the match. Benoit then hits a diving headbutt off the top rope on Enos, and then Benoit quickly applies a crossface on Mike Enos. And your winner of the match by submission is Chris Benoit. Hats off to Chris Benoit for getting the win in that matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Norman Smiley versus Chavo Guerrero. I thought this was an okay matchup. Norman was keeping the pace of the match, with Norman applying a chicken wing on Chavo Guerrero. And your winner of the match by submission is Norman Smiley. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Fit Finlay versus Van Hammer. I thought this was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between Fit Finlay and Van Hammer, with Finlay keeping the pace of the match. But Finlay ultimately hits a tombstone pile driver on Van Hammer, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Fit Finlay. Hats off to Fit Finlay for getting the win in that matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Wrath versus Bam Bam Bigelow. I thought this was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between Wrath and Bigelow, with Wrath keeping the pace of the match. Bigelow then gets up, hits a Greetings from Ashbury Park on Wrath, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match is Bam Bam Bigelow. Hats off to Bam Bam Bigelow for getting the win in that matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Conan versus Lex Luger. I thought this was an okay matchup. Conan was attacking Luger in this matchup and keeping the pace. Miss Elizabeth is here. Conan then applies a tequila sunrise on Lex. Miss Elizabeth then gets involved in the match by spraying paint in Conan's face, which allows Luger to capitalize on this and applies his signature torture rack on Conan. And your winner of the match is Lex Luger. Hats off to Lex Luger for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Chris Jericho versus Perry Saturn. I thought this was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between Jericho and Saturn, with Jericho hitting a roll-up on Saturn, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match is Chris Jericho. Hats off to Chris Jericho for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is for the WCW Cruiserweight Championship. It is Rey Mysterio Jr. versus Billy Kidman versus Juventud Guerrera versus Psychosis. I thought this was a good matchup. Back and forth matchup with everybody involved. Kidman then hits a slingshot head scissors on Mysterio. Guerrera and Psychosis then attack Mysterio and Kidman. Kidman then ultimately hits a shooting star press on Guerrera. Pins for the 3. And your winner of the match, and at that time still Cruiserweight Champion, is Billy Kidman. Hats off to Billy Kidman for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Ric Flair teaming up with David Flair versus Curt Hennig and Barry Windham. I thought this was a good matchup. Back and forth matchup with both teams involved. David Flair was keeping the pace of the match. Rick then hits a back body drop on Windham. NWO are here. Benoit is here as well. Wolfpack is also here. NWO then attack the Flairs. Anderson then hits Hennig with a tower iron, but David then goes for the cover, pins for the 3, and your winners of the match are Ric Flair and David Flair. Hats off to Ric Flair and David Flair for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is the main event of WCW Sold Out 1999. It is Goldberg versus Scott Hall in a stun gun ladder match. I thought this was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between Goldberg and Scott Hall. Goldberg then hits Hall with a ladder. Hall then gets up, hits Goldberg with a ladder as well. Goldberg then climbs the ladder. Disco Inferno is here, knocks him off. Hall then climbs the ladder and grabs the stun gun. Goldberg then hits a kick on Hall. Goldberg then grabs the stun gun. Goldberg then throws the stun gun in the air. Then Goldberg hits a spear on Hall. Goldberg then hits a jackhammer on Hall as well. And then Goldberg ultimately stuns Hall. And your winner of the match is Goldberg. Hats off to Goldberg for getting the win in this matchup. A couple things I'm going to say about Sold Out 1999 before I get out of here. It was a solid event, man. It wasn't that bad of an event. The main event, I can understand why they booked the main event due to the fact that Scott Hall kind of, used the same stun gun on Goldberg to lose the championship match he had against Kevin Nash, which also ended the streak. The Cruiserweight matchup as well was one of my favorite matches on this card. I mean, I've said this multiple times about WCW. Their Cruiserweight division was severely underrated. And the amount of talent that walked through that door as a Cruiserweight, guys like Billy Kidman, Rey Mysterio Jr., Psychosis, Juventud Guerrera, Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, Dean Malenko, Jericho. I mean, a lot of really good talent, great talent walked through those doors in WCW, man. And that Cruiserweight division for WCW was severely underrated. But just like I do with every single one of these pay-per-views, you guys know by now, I always give these pay-per-views a rating from 1 out of 10, 1 being the absolute worst, 10 being the absolute best. I'm going to have to give WCW Sold Out 1999 a solid 5, 5.5 at best. But this is my review of WCW Sold Out 1999. I hope you guys are out there staying safe, be careful, and remember, stay classic. Peace.